Have you ever stood somewhere so quiet you could hear the earth breathe beneath you? Because that's exactly what I heard the night I stepped into Hollow Creek Cemetery. The ground moved. I swear to God, it moved. At first, I thought it was the wind or maybe a trick of my imagination after a 6-hour drive and too much gas station coffee. But when the soil near the gate shifted ever so slightly, just enough to make the gravel crunch, I froze. There was no wind. The trees stood perfectly still under the pale blue light of the half moon, and every instinct in me screamed to turn around. But I didn't. I came here for a story, and Hollow Creek was full of them. The first time I heard about this place was from an old sheriff's report buried deep in an online archive. 7 disappearances in 15 years, all near the same stretch of road, all ending near this forgotten cemetery. Locals refused to talk about it. The official record said it was closed in 1957, but Google Maps showed it still existed. That's what caught my attention. Cemeteries don't vanish. They're supposed to stay on record. But Hollow Creek, it wasn't supposed to exist anymore. I parked my car about half a mile away, just to be safe. The last stretch of road leading here was cracked, overgrown with weeds. The air felt wrong. Heavy, somehow, like it was pushing against me. When I reached the rusted gates, I saw the sign dangling from one hinge, swaying slightly even though there wasn't the slightest breeze. Hollow Creek Cemetery, EST 1892, closed to the public, but there was something strange scratched into the wood beneath the lettering, like someone had clawed it in desperation. 3 words, barely visible under the grime. Don't listen back. I ran my fingers over it, my flashlight trembling slightly. The wood was splintered, fresh. That should have been my first warning. I stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the gate's threshold, the temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. My breath turned white. I could hear my heartbeat thudding in my ears as my flashlight cut across rows of ancient, crumbling gravestones. The fog hugged the ground like a living thing, crawling between the tombs. Some stones leaned at impossible angles. Others were broken entirely, their names erased by decades of neglect. But what struck me most was how recent some graves looked. I found flowers, fresh ones, laid on a mound near the center of the cemetery. Who the hell was still visiting this place? As I knelt to inspect the flowers, I noticed the headstone wasn't weathered at all. The inscription looked new. Sarah Enright, beloved daughter, 1998 to 2023. My stomach twisted. That was this year. I double-checked the carving with my fingers, tracing the date again and again. How could a cemetery closed since 1957 have a grave from 2023? Behind me, a twig snapped. I spun around, light slicing through the fog. Nothing, just the rustling of dead leaves. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Probably an animal, I muttered, but even my voice sounded too loud here, like the air was swallowing my words. Then I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. It came from somewhere to my left, near the old mausoleum. Evelyn. I froze, every muscle locked in place. My flashlight flickered. No one knew I was here. I hadn't told a soul, not even my editor. I came alone without permission, hoping to make my name with this story. And yet, someone had just whispered my name. I slowly moved toward the sound. Each step crunched through the frostbitten grass. The fog thickened the closer I got to Mausoleum, a massive stone structure with angel statues on each corner, both missing their faces. When I reached the door, I noticed deep gouges on the stone like claw marks. My flashlight beam trembled. As I leaned closer, the scratches formed words. They hear you. A chill rippled through me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of the light. I wanted to turn back, to run to my car and never return. But something inside me, the journalist part that always needed answers, wouldn't let me. I pushed the heavy iron door. It groaned open, echoing through the night. Inside, the air smelled of rot and damp stone. My light swept across cracked walls and piles of debris until it landed on something impossible. A wooden table, freshly placed, with a small, dusty notebook sitting on top. It wasn't covered in cobwebs or mold. It looked recent, like someone had left it here yesterday. I opened it. The first page read, "To whoever finds this, if you're hearing the voices, it's already too late." The handwriting was messy, frantic. The next pages were filled with notes, maps, and sketches of graves, each marked with strange symbols. But one phrase repeated on every page: "Don't stay after midnight." I checked my watch. 11:54 p.m. I laughed nervously, trying to convince myself this was just some elaborate prank. But as I turned the page, something heavy slammed against the mausoleum door. Once, twice, then silence. My heart stopped. I killed my flashlight and held my breath. The air was suffocatingly quiet until I heard soft footsteps just outside the door. They stopped directly in front of it. Whoever or whatever it was didn't move. And then it began to hum. A low, tuneless hum that made my skin crawl. The same sound a person might make while digging. The humming lasted maybe 30 seconds before it faded away, followed by slow retreating footsteps. When I finally turned my flashlight back on, I noticed something on the floor by the door, a smear of fresh dirt and a single muddy footprint. But the strangest part? It wasn't human. The heel was missing entirely, as if whoever made it had been walking on their toes or claws. I backed away, slamming the notebook shut, but before I could move, something caught my eye through a crack in the wall. Outside, beyond the mist, I could see movement, figures, dozens of them, standing between the graves. Perfectly still. Their faces were pale, their eyes reflecting the moonlight. None of them were breathing. And then, one by one, they turned their heads toward me. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there in the darkness of the mausoleum, my flashlight trembling in my hand, the pale beam cutting a thin path through the fog, leaking in through the cracks. Outside, the figures were still, like statues carved from the night itself. Their faces remained blank, their bodies slightly swaying as if caught in a slow, invisible current. My breath felt shallow, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I didn't dare blink, afraid that if I did, they would vanish, or worse, come closer. Then one of them moved. A step forward, then another. The sound of its foot scraping the gravel was faint, but sharp enough to slice through the silence like a blade. I stumbled backward, my shoulder colliding with the stone wall. The light in my hand quivered, flickering with every heartbeat. The figure stopped only a few feet from the door, just outside the faint halo of my flashlight. Its head tilted slightly to the side, as though studying me. I could make out the shape of its mouth, hanging open just a little, like it was about to speak. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, but my voice cracked halfway through. The air felt thicker now, heavier, pressing against my lungs. There was no answer, only the faint hum again, low and distant this time, rising from somewhere deeper within the cemetery. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the figures began to dissolve back into the fog. One by one, their outlines wavered and broke apart until the graveyard was empty again. I was alone, or at least it looked that way. I forced myself to step outside. The fog had thickened, curling around my legs like smoke. I shone my light across the rows of graves, but everything looked normal again, too normal. The ground that had shifted earlier was still, the trees unmoving. If it weren't for the notebook in my bag and the dirt-stained footprint on the floor behind me, I could convince myself it was all an illusion born from exhaustion and fear. But something inside me whispered otherwise. Something deep, primal, certain. I turned to leave, but then I heard another sound, a faint metallic clinking from somewhere up the path. I hesitated, my flashlight cutting through the mist. The sound grew louder, clearer. Someone was walking slowly, dragging something across the gravel. I froze again. Out of the fog emerged an old man, his hunched figure illuminated by a lantern swinging from his hand. The metal chain of the lantern clinked with every step. He wore a long, tattered coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. His other hand gripped a shovel that looked older than he was. "Well," he rasped as he drew closer, his voice rough and cracked like dry wood, "ain't seen a soul in here for years. Not a living one, at least." I swallowed hard, unsure if I should speak. "Who are you?" He chuckled, a low, humorless sound. Caretaker. Been looking after Hollow Creek since before you were born. He stepped closer, and I caught a glimpse of his face in the lantern light. His skin was pale, creased with deep lines, and his eyes were the color of ash, lifeless, yet somehow watchful. You shouldn't be here, miss. Cemetery's closed. I'm a journalist, I stammered. Evelyn Marsh. I'm investigating the disappearances around here. I didn't mean to trespass. The man's gaze hardened. Disappearances, huh? You people never learn. He turned his head toward the graves, the lantern casting eerie shadows across his face. This place don't take kindly to strangers digging up its stories. You best leave before it decides you're one of them. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he knelt beside a nearby grave, brushing the dirt from the name carved into the stone. They all come here, thinking they'll find answers. Reporters, ghost hunters, thrill seekers. But once you step inside them gates, you ain't just visiting the dead. You're walking their dreams. He looked up at me, his eyes glinting like wet stone. And the dead here, they don't sleep easy. A chill crawled down my spine. You're saying they're awake? The caretaker sighed, straightening up with a groan. Not awake. Listening. Always listening. He turned toward me, the flame from his lantern flickering wildly for a moment. You heard them already, didn't you? The whispers. I didn't answer, but my silence was enough. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. Then it's already started. My hands tightened around the flashlight. What started? The calling. His voice was almost a whisper now. Once they speak your name, it's too late to pretend you didn't hear them. They remember you. They want you to remember them. He stepped closer, the smell of earth and rust heavy around him. You must leave before midnight. Don't look back. Don't answer if you hear your name again. And whatever you do, don't dig. Before I could ask what he meant, a gust of wind tore through the graveyard, scattering leaves and extinguishing his lantern. The light vanished, plunging us both into darkness. I heard him curse under his breath, fumbling to relight it. My flashlight flickered again, but when the beam steadied, the caretaker was gone. The only sound left was a rustling of leaves, and that faint humming again, now louder and closer. It was coming from the direction of the newer graves. I wanted to run, but something about the caretaker's warning rooted me to the spot. Don't dig, he had said. Yet my curiosity, that same reckless drive that brought me here, forced my feet forward. The hum deepened into something more like a voice. Low, rhythmic, almost like someone chanting under their breath. The ground beneath me trembled slightly as I neared Sarah and Wright's grave, the one with the fresh flowers. I crouched beside it, brushing the petals aside, and my hand brushed something cold, a small brass locket half buried in the dirt. I pulled it free, brushing the soil from its surface. It was engraved with a single word, Evelyn. My heart nearly stopped. I fumbled to open it, my fingers shaking. Inside was a faded photograph of me standing at the gate of Hollow Creek Cemetery. The same pose, the same coat, the same terrified look I had now. But the date on the back made my stomach twist into knots. It read, May 12th, 2023. 2 weeks from today. A loud crack split the air, and I looked up just in time to see one of the angel statues topple from the mausoleum roof, shattering against the ground inches from where I knelt. I stumbled backward, landing hard on the damp soil, the locket clutched tightly in my hand. The humming had stopped. In its place came a whisper that slid like ice down my spine. Welcome back, Evelyn. I turned toward the voice and saw a figure standing among the tombs. It wasn't the caretaker. It was someone else, someone wearing my face. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My lungs refused to obey. The air around me thickened until it felt like I was trapped underwater, each heartbeat echoing in my ears like distant thunder. The figure standing among the gravestones was identical to me in every possible way. Same dark hair, same coat, even the same tear-shaped scar near my right eyebrow. But what froze the blood in my veins wasn't the resemblance. It was the expression. Her eyes were hollow, her smile too calm, too knowing. It was like she'd been waiting for me. Who are you? I stammered, backing away slowly. My flashlight trembled, the beam slicing through the fog and landing squarely on her face. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. I told you not to come back, she said in my voice, my exact tone, my cadence. Every syllable mirrored perfectly. Her lips barely moved, yet the words seemed to echo from all directions. You never listen. You never do. My heart was pounding so violently it hurt. You're not real, I whispered. You're not real. This is a trick. She tilted her head, smiling faintly. That's what you said last time. A cold wave of dread swept through me. Last time. She began to walk forward, her boots making no sound on the gravel. Every time, Evelyn. Every time you come here, thinking you're the first. Every time you find a locket. Every time you see me. Every time you die. The words hit me like a physical blow. My legs wobbled, the world spinning around me. No, I said, shaking my head. I just got here tonight. This is my first time here. She stepped closer until the beam of my flashlight illuminated the mud splattered on her coat, the same as mine, except darker. Stained. You said that before, too. Her voice softened, almost pitying. And you'll say it again. The fog shifted behind her, swirling as if alive, forming faint outlines of other figures, shadows moving within shadows. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body felt paralyzed. The earth beneath my feet trembled faintly, and I could smell the dampness of the soil, the faint metallic scent of rust or blood. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice barely audible. Her expression changed. The smile vanished. I'm not doing anything. I'm trying to stop you. She looked past me, toward the mausoleum. He's waking up. Before I could ask who she meant, she reached out her hand. Her fingers were pale, smeared with something dark. If you stay, he'll take you again. He always takes you. A gust of freezing wind tore through the cemetery, making the trees creak and the fog dance wildly. I blinked, and she was gone. The place where she had stood was empty, only the disturbed earth marking her presence. I turned in every direction, my flashlight beam whipping through the night. But there was nothing. That's when I heard it, the sound of metal scraping against stone, coming from the direction of the mausoleum. Slow, deliberate, rhythmic, like someone dragging a shovel. The caretaker's warning echoed in my mind. Don't dig. Against every rational impulse, I moved toward the sound. The mausoleum loomed ahead, its open door gaping like a wound in the night. I stepped inside again, the smell wrought stronger now. The notebook still sat on the table, pages fluttering in the cold draft. But something new was there, a mirror propped against the far wall. It hadn't been there before. The mirror was tall and ornate, framed in tarnished silver that reflected the dim light of my flashlight. Its surface shimmered faintly, rippling like water. I approached cautiously, my reflection swimming in and out of focus. For a brief second, I thought the glass was fogged, but when I wiped it, the reflection didn't move. It stood perfectly still. My pulse spiked. I stepped back, watching in disbelief as my mirror itself tilted its head slowly. Even though I hadn't moved, its mouth curved into that same knowing smile I'd seen outside. Then it whispered, "He's behind you." I spun around, but the mausoleum was empty. My flashlight flickered again, and in that momentary flash, I saw something massive moving in the far corner of the room, a shape rising from the shadows, tall and possibly thin, its outline warped like smoke given form. It had no face, only a dark hollow where eyes should have been. The air grew colder, so cold that the tips of my fingers went numb. The figure moved closer, each step accompanied by a deep rumbling beneath the floor, like the cemetery itself was groaning. My mind screamed at me to flee, but the doorway behind me seemed to dissolve into blackness. There was nowhere to run. The figure stopped a few feet away, and though it had no mouth, I felt it speak inside my head, a voice that was not sound but vibration, a whisper that came from beneath my skin. "You shouldn't have come back, Evelyn Marsh." "How do you know my name?" I whispered. It tilted its featureless head. "Because you gave it to me." I stumbled backward, Hitting the mirror, the glass rippled again, and this time my reflection reached out from within it, grabbing my wrist. The sensation was freezing, sharp, like plunging my arm into ice water. I screamed, struggling to pull free, but the reflection's grip was impossibly strong. The shadow figure moved closer still, its presence pressing down on me like a weight. "You wrote your name here," the voice hissed, vibrating through the air. "Every year you come, every year you forget, and every year you write again." Suddenly, the notebook on the table burst open, its pages flipping wildly until they stopped on a drawing of the cemetery. My name, Evelyn Marsh, was written over and over hundreds of times, covering the page like an infection spreading through paper. The reflection yanked harder, and my arm began to sink into the mirror, up to my elbow. The glass felt like thick, cold liquid. Panic surged through me. I braced my legs against the floor and pulled with all my strength, letting out a raw, animal scream. The glass cracked, shattering the mirror into 1,000 fragments. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping. The room was silent again, the shadow gone, the reflection vanished. Only the notebook remained, lying open at my feet. The words on the last page were new, freshly written in the dark, wet ink that smelled like iron. "You'll never remember what you did." My vision blurred, and I felt a strange dizziness wash over me, like the ground was shifting beneath me again. The air pulsed with a low hum, almost like a heartbeat. I staggered out of the mausoleum into the freezing fog. Outside, the world looked different. The trees were twisted, their branches bare. The graves were older, more decayed, some half swallowed by the earth. The sign above the gate no longer said "Closed to public." It was gone entirely, replaced by a single rusted plaque that read, "In memory of Evelyn Marsh, 1998 to 2023. My knees buckled. I stared at the name, my name, carved into metal weathered by time. I reached out to touch it, and the moment my fingers brushed the letters, the cold shot straight through my hand like lightning. From behind me came the faint sound of dirt shifting, then a whisper, soft, familiar, impossibly close. "Don't forget again." I turned, and there she was, my double, kneeling by an open grave, her face pale beneath the moonlight. The cold air stung my skin as I stared at the open grave. The fog coiled around its edges, twisting like smoke rising from something alive beneath the surface. My double knelt at its side, her pale fingers resting on the rim of the pit. The sound I thought was whispering was clearer now, a low, rhythmic rasping that seemed to come from below. Breathing, slow, deliberate, human. The earth itself was breathing. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable, her eyes shining with something that wasn't quite malice but wasn't mercy either. "He's still waiting for you," she said softly, her voice layered with mine, the two tones overlapping like two radio frequencies barely in sync. "You can't keep leaving him down there." I took a step back, shaking my head violently. "I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know any of this. I just came here for a story." She smiled faintly, her head tilting as though she pitied me. "You always say that." The ground beneath us trembled. The soil inside the grave shifted and rose like something or someone was pushing from beneath. A thick, damp smell filled the air, a mix of wet earth and decay, so strong it burned my throat. I stumbled backward, but my double didn't move. She just sat there, staring into the pit as though she were waiting for it to open wider. "You need to remember," she murmured. "You have to remember what you did here." I wanted to scream that I didn't know what she meant, but before I could, the earth split with a soft, sickening sound. A pale hand broke through the surface, thin, skeletal fingers clutching at the night air. My heart stopped. The soil crumbled as the rest of the arm emerged, slick with mud. Then a face surfaced, eyes closed, mouth gasping like a newborn's first breath. It was a man. I couldn't move. The man's face was gaunt, dirt caked in every crease of his skin, but when his eyes opened, I felt a bolt of ice shoot through me. They were blue, strikingly, impossibly blue. Eyes I knew, eyes I had seen before, though I couldn't remember where. He gasped again, his chest rising weakly as if he'd been buried alive for years, and only now clawed his way back to existence. "Help me!" His voice was a dry whisper, barely audible. Before I could react, my double stood, her movement slow, deliberate. She looked down at him, then back at me. "You put him there," she said. "You're the reason he can't rest." "That's not true," I choked out. "I don't even know him." But deep down, something twisted inside me. Something buried just beneath the surface of my thoughts. His face, it wasn't unfamiliar. There was a flicker of memory, a flash of a car, headlights cutting through rain, the sound of screaming metal, then darkness. I staggered backward, clutching my head. "No, I don't." "Evelyn." The man's voice was stronger now, rough but clear. He was looking right at me. "You promise." The words cracked something open inside me. Images flooded my mind, memories that didn't feel like memories, more like ghosts pressing their way into my skull. A night drive down a narrow road, a bottle on the seat beside me, headlights blurring through tears, a sudden shape in the road, the sound of tires skidding, impact. I stumbled, falling to my knees. My breath came in ragged gasps. "No, I didn't mean to." My double crouched beside the grave, her expression solemn. "You always say that, too." The man in the grave tried to reach for me, his fingers trembling. "You left me," he whispered. "You buried me here." I shook my head violently, crawling backward. "That's not true. I never." But even as I said it, the memory sharpened. My own hands gripping the shovel, digging through the rain, burying something that wouldn't stop moving. My own voice whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over again until my throat bled. The ground shuddered violently, and the man let out a scream that pierced the fog and rattled my bones. His body convulsed, twisting unnaturally, his skin paling even more until it looked translucent. My reflection, my other self, reached into the grave, pressing her hand gently to his chest. The movement silenced him instantly. His body went limp, his mouth falling open in a silent scream. The sound of the earth breathing stopped. She turned to me again, and for the first time, her calm expression cracked. Her eyes were wet. "Every time you come back, you force him to live it again. You keep him trapped because you won't let yourself remember." I was shaking uncontrollably now. "What are you talking about? Why would I come back here?" "Because you can't die," she said simply. "Not until you understand why he did." The ground beneath the grave began to collapse, pulling the man's body down into the earth once more. I screamed and reached out, but the moment my fingers touched the dirt, it felt like ice and fire at once. The world tilted, and I fell forward into the open grave. Darkness swallowed me whole. The sensation of falling seemed endless. I didn't feel air or gravity, only a cold void pressing against my skin. Then, slowly, a light appeared below me, a dim, flickering glow. When I landed, it wasn't on soil but on marble, cold and smooth. I was in a tunnel lined with stone walls, the same ones I'd seen in the mausoleum, but older, deeper. Torches flickered in brackets along the walls, casting long, trembling shadows. The sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I turned to see the caretaker standing at the far end of the tunnel, his lantern burning brighter than before. His eyes looked hollow, darker, as if something inside him had gone out. "I told you not to dig," he said quietly, his voice almost lost in the tunnel's endless hum. "Now you've woken it." "What is it?" I whispered. "What's happening to me?" He stared at me for a long time before answering. "You think this place is a graveyard," he said. "It isn't. It's a memory. Every stone, every grave, every whisper, it's a piece of what you buried, and it keeps growing." He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the wall like a living thing. "Hollow Creek isn't where the dead rest, Miss Marsh. It's where guilt breathes." I felt something stir in the darkness beyond him, a low, rattling growl that seemed to come from the stone itself. The torches flickered violently, one by one, plunging the tunnel into deeper shadow. The caretaker turned his head sharply, eyes wide. "It's coming." "What is—" Before he could answer, the wall behind him cracked open with a deafening roar. Black soil poured through the fissure, swallowing him whole. His lantern fell, shattering on the floor, its flames sputtering out. I screamed and ran, the tunnel shaking violently around me as unseen things clawed at the edges of my vision. The humming returned, louder now, deeper, vibrating through my bones. It wasn't one voice anymore, but hundreds, all whispering the same word over and over, echoing down the corridor in a chorus of the damned. Evelyn. I stumbled through the darkness, my hands scraping along the cold walls until I reached another doorway. I threw myself through it and slammed it shut behind me. My body collapsed against the wood, my chest heaving, my mind spinning in terror and confusion. When I finally dared open my eyes, I realized I was no longer underground. I was standing in a small stone chapel. The pews were covered in dust, the altar draped in a torn cloth. Moonlight streamed through the broken windows, illuminating a single coffin resting in the center of the room. The lid was open. Inside lay another me, eyes closed, hands folded neatly over her chest, a faint smile on her lips. My heart stopped. I took a trembling step forward, staring down at the lifeless version of myself. There was something clasped in her hands, a small brass locket, the same one I had found earlier. And when I looked closer, I realized there was another engraving on its back this time, one that hadn't been there before. Open when you remember. The chapel was so still that I could hear my heartbeat echoing against the cracked walls. Every flicker of moonlight seemed alive, dancing along the coffin's edge as though the light itself was uncertain whether it wanted to touch the body lying there. My body. The air was cold, damp, carrying the faint smell of candle wax and rot. The sight of myself in that coffin made something inside me fracture. I could feel the edges of my reality splintering like glass under pressure. I wanted to run, to scream, to wake up from whatever nightmare I'd fallen into. But the moment my eyes settled on the locket clutched in the dead version of my hands, all the chaos inside me turned into a single unbearable pull. That locket, its metallic gleam under the moonlight, seemed to pulse like a heartbeat of its own. I reached forward slowly, my trembling fingers hovering just inches above it. I could feel warmth radiating from it, impossible warmth in this frozen place. As my fingers brushed the brass surface, the air shifted. The chapel's silence broke with a long, drawn-out sigh, like the building itself was exhaling after holding its breath for a century. The wooden pews creaked. Dust swirled into spirals, catching the faint silver light. I hesitated. The engraving, open when you remember, glimmered faintly, as if mocking me. I didn't remember. Not really. There were fragments, broken flashes, but nothing that made sense. Yet, something deep within me, something that had been buried under years of denial and confusion, began to stir. It was painful, like dragging something rotten from beneath the skin. I pried the locket from my dead hands. The metal was cold again now, biting into my skin. When I opened it, there was no photo inside this time, just a small folded piece of parchment, so old it crumbled slightly as I unfolded it. A few words were written in smudged ink. Confess what you buried, or he will never rest. The words sent a wave of nausea through me. My throat went dry. The edges of the chapel blurred as another memory surged up, violent and vivid, like a film reel catching fire. Rain pounding on the windshield. The sound of laughter fading into screams. A man's voice yelling my name. Evelyn, slow down. Then the sickening crunch of metal twisting, glass shattering in silence. I fell to my knees beside the coffin, gasping. I remembered now. His name, his face. The man from a grave. David. He wasn't just anyone. He was my fiancé. My breath hitched, and the world spun. I could see it now as if I were standing outside my own body that night. The argument in the car, the guilt in his eyes when he confessed that he'd been unfaithful, the way I gripped the wheel tighter, driving faster, tears blurring the road. Then the flash of headlights, another car, wrong lane, too close, and everything going black. When I woke up, I was lying on the side of the road, drenched in rain. The car was a mangled ruin in the ditch. David wasn't moving. His body was pinned under twisted metal, his chest barely rising. I remembered the panic, the horror, The irrational belief that if I buried him here, somehow, I could make it right, that I could hide what had happened, what I'd done. I didn't even call for help. I dug with my bare hands in the mud beside the cemetery, sobbing as the rain washed the blood from my fingers. When a memory released me, I realized I was still kneeling on the chapel floor, my nails digging into the stone. The silence around me was suffocating, thick with judgment. From somewhere behind me came the faint scrape of footsteps. I turned, and there he was, David, standing in the doorway. His face was the same as before, pale and broken, but his eyes were calm now, empty, but not angry. "You buried me," he said softly. His voice was so fragile, so human, that it shattered whatever defenses I had left. Tears stung my eyes. "I mean to," I whispered. "It was an accident." I panicked. He stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate. His clothes were torn, his skin smeared with dirt. "You buried the truth with me. Every time you came back, you pretended it was just a story. You told yourself it was for work, for journalism, for closure. But you were looking for yourself." I backed away until I hit the coffin. My own lifeless face stared up at me, pale and peaceful. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to remember," he said. "Completely. Every detail. Every breath you stole." The torches along the walls flared to life all at once, casting the chapel in a fiery orange glow. Shadows twisted on the walls, forming faces, shapes, silhouettes that writhed like souls trying to escape. My reflection appeared again in the coffin's polished surface. Only this time, it wasn't dead. It smiled up at me with something cold and knowing. "You think you buried one man," the reflection whispered, "but there were two." The ground quaked violently, and the coffin split down the center, the wood splintering as darkness seeped out from the crack. I stumbled backward, falling hard onto the cold floor. The black mist that poured out began to take form. First the outline of a man, then two, then many. Faces emerged from the smoke, all half-formed, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. I could see David's face among them, but his expression wasn't vengeful anymore. It was pleading. "End it," he whispered. "Please." I clutched the lock in my hand, so tightly that the metal cut into my palm. "How?" I shouted. "How do I end it?" "Tell the truth," came his voice, echoing around me, overlapping with the others until it became a chorus. "Tell the world what you did." "I can't," I cried, choking on the words. "They'll destroy me. My life, my career, everything." "Then you'll never leave," my reflection hissed. Her eyes burned with pale light, her smile stretching too wide. "You'll keep coming back. You'll die here again and again until the world forgets you, until you forget yourself." The chapel walls began to bleed shadow, the torches sputtering as the floor buckled beneath me. I crawled toward the altar, dragging myself up by the edge. The locket in my hand grew hot, so hot it burned, and when I opened again, I saw something new inside, a drop of blood suspended where the photo had been. My blood. The voices around me grew louder. The chapel dissolved into darkness until there was only the sound of breathing, mine and something else's. I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold, familiar. David's voice whispered beside my ear, "It's not just me down here, Evelyn." Before I could turn, I was pulled backward, the ground opening beneath me again, the black mist swallowing me whole. I fell through darkness, through whispers, through memories that weren't mine but belonged to the dead buried beneath Hollow Creek. When I landed, I was back in the cemetery. The fog was thicker now, glowing faintly with pale light. The gravestones were gone, replaced by endless mounds of earth stretching into the horizon. Each mound had a cross at its head, each cross carved with name, and one name repeated again and again over hundreds of graves. Evelyn Marsh. The air was filled with soft murmurs, like 1,000 voices saying the same thing under their breath. Confess, confess, confess. I fell to my knees, clutching the burning locket to my chest. My tears hissed when they hit the ground. Somewhere beyond the fog, I heard the sound of digging again, the rhythmic scrape of a shovel, steady and patient. The caretaker's voice drifted through the mist, low and sorrowful. Some graves never stop being dug, he said, because some souls never stop hiding. The ground began to move again, soil shifting beneath my hands. A grave was opening at my feet, my grave, and carved into stone beside it were words that hadn't been there before. She lies here until she tells the truth. The locket pulsed in my hand like a heartbeat, and then, slowly, it began to open by itself. Inside was a single, still beating eye, my own. The locket trembled violently in my hand, the small beating eye staring back at me as if it could see through the layers of my soul. I wanted to drop it, to hurl it into the earth, but I couldn't. My fingers refused to let go. It pulsed in rhythm with my heart, a sickening synchrony that made my skin crawl. The cemetery around me was silent now, eerily silent, as if even the wind was holding its breath. The fog had thickened into a wall of white, and I could barely see beyond the nearest mound. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was a kind of silence that hides something waiting to speak. Then, faintly, the whispers began again, low at first, like the hum of distant wind through trees. Then, clearer, dozens of voices, male, female, young, old, all speaking in unison. Evelyn Marsh. They spoke my name with such clarity that I felt the air vibrate against my skin. I turned in every direction, my flashlight useless now, its beams swallowed by the fog. "Who are you?" I shouted, though my voice trembled. "What do you want from me?" The voices paused. Then one of them, a man's voice, calm and deep, answered from somewhere ahead of me. "We want to be remembered." The fog parted slightly, just enough for me to see faint outlines forming in the white haze. Dozens of figures, standing shoulder to shoulder, each one as still as a statue. Their faces were blurred, undefined, as though the fog itself had sculpted them. But their eyes, every single one of them, glowed faintly blue, the same color as David's. I stumbled backward, clutching the locket so hard that its edges dug into my palm. "You're not real?" I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew how hollow it sounded. The man's voice came again. "We are the ones buried in your silence. You buried us all." I shook my head furiously. "No, I only buried him. David, I didn't. You buried every memory that hurt." Another voice interrupted, this one a woman's, sharp and cold. "Every mistake, every sin. You thought if you forgot, it would all go away. But forgetting doesn't bury the dead. It just feeds them." The ground beneath my feet trembled. One by one, the mound began to split open, dark soil spilling over like blood from an open wound. From each grave, something began to rise. Hands, faces, shapes half-formed and covered in mud. Their movements were slow, deliberate, but filled with purpose. My pulse thundered in my ears. I stumbled back, tripping over a broken cross, falling hard onto the wet ground. The locket flew from my grip and landed beside one of the open graves. It pulsed there, bright red now, as if it were bleeding light. The beating inside it grew louder, faster, filling the air with a rhythm that wasn't mine anymore. "You can't leave," said the man's voice closer now. "Not until you give back what you took." I forced myself to my feet. My entire body shook. "What do you want me to do?" I shouted. "I can't change what happened." A figure stepped out of the fog. It was David. His eyes still glowed that unnatural blue, but his expression was soft now, almost sorrowful. "You can't change it," he said, "but you can face it." I stared at him, my throat tight. "How?" He reached down and picked up the locket, the red glow reflecting off his pale skin. "Open it," he said. I already did. I cried. "It showed me." "Not like that." His voice deepened, almost reverberating with something older than him, older than both of us. "You open it with fear. You haven't opened it with truth." I didn't understand, but something in his tone made me step forward anyway. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the locket when he handed it back to me. It was burning now, searing through my skin, but I didn't let go. I pressed my thumbs against the latch and forced it open again. This time, instead of darkness, light spilled out, bright, blinding light that cut through the fog like a blade. The world around me vanished. When my vision cleared, I was standing in the middle of the road. Rain poured down, soaking through my coat. The headlights of a car illuminated the slick asphalt, and the sound of thunder cracked overhead. I knew this road. I knew this night. The car's engine was running, and through the windshield, I could see two people arguing inside. Me and David. My chest tightened. I could hear my own voice yelling through the rain, muffled by the glass. The words were bitter, sharp, the kind that wound even after they're spoken. You lied to me. You made me believe you cared. David's voice was desperate. I made a mistake, Evelyn. Please, just stop the car. I saw myself grip the wheel tighter, tears streaming down my face, my foot pressing harder on the accelerator. I loved you, I screamed, and you threw it away. The other car's headlights appeared ahead, sudden and bright. I could feel the terror, the instinct to swerve, but my hands froze. The crash came again, deafening, violent. I felt in my bones. When the world settled, I was standing beside the wreck. The rain had stopped, smoke rose from the twisted metal, and the smell of gasoline hung heavy in the air. I walked closer, unable to look away. David was slumped over the wheel, blood streaking his temple. I knelt beside the car, pressing my trembling hand to his chest. Faint heartbeat, faint breath. I remembered now. The panic, the fear of losing everything, the whispered voice in my mind telling me to fix it, to hide it, to bury the evidence of what I'd done. I looked up then, through the rain, and saw the cemetery gates not far away. Hollow Creek Cemetery. It was like it had been waiting for me. I watched myself drag David's body through the mud, watched my hands dig through the wet soil, watched the madness in my eyes. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My other self whispered, I'll make it right. I'll make it right. But every handful of dirt I threw over him only made the darkness thicker. The scene blurred again, dissolving into fog. I was back in the cemetery, the graves around me silent now. The figures had stopped moving. They were watching me, waiting. The locket in my hand was still open, but now it was no longer glowing. Inside it was a single drop of rainwater, clear and still. David stood a few feet away. His expression was softer now, almost peaceful. Now you remember, he said. Tears streamed down my face. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. He nodded. Fear doesn't end with death, Evelyn. It just changes shape. You've been living it over and over, trapped here by your own guilt. I took a step toward him, the weight of years of denial pressing on my chest. Can I leave? I asked. Can I make it stop? He looked down at the locket in my hand. That's not for me to decide, he said quietly. It's for you. The wind picked up again, carrying whispers through the cemetery, gentler now, no longer angry. I looked at the graves surrounding me, all marked with my name, and realized what they meant. Each one was a life I'd lived here, a loop I'd been trapped in, repeating the same horror, the same denial for eternity. Each grave was a failed attempt at redemption. The locket pulsed once more, faintly, as if asking me to choose. I forgive you, I whispered to him, to myself, to the version of me that had died here over and over again. The fog began to lift. The graves faded one by one. The locket's light dimmed, then vanished completely. David smiled faintly, his body dissolving into the mist like breath on glass. Then remember, he said, his voice fading, and let us rest. The earth beneath me opened, but this time it wasn't dark or cold. Light poured upward, warm and golden, wrapping around me until everything else disappeared. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in daylight. The cemetery was quiet and empty, the grass overgrown but bright under the sun. The sign at the gate still read Hollow Creek Cemetery, but beneath it was a smaller plaque I hadn't noticed before. It said, dedicated to the souls who found peace through truth. I looked down at my hand. The locket was still there, but it was cracked now, lifeless, its surface dull. I set it gently on a nearby grave and turned to leave. As I reached the gate, I heard the faintest whisper behind me. Goodbye, Evelyn. I didn't turn back. But when I passed the gate and looked down the empty road, a single thought froze me in place. The road wasn't empty at all. A car was parked at the bend, engine idling, a woman in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, tears glinting in her eyes. She looked exactly like me, and when our eyes met through the windshield, I heard her whisper, "I just came here for a story." The wind howled through the trees as if the world were taking a long, deep breath before exhaling something it had held for far too long. I stood frozen at the cemetery gate, staring down the narrow road that cut through the wilderness like a scar. The woman in the car, my reflection, my past, my curse, sat behind the wheel, her eyes red from crying. The faint hum of the engine carried through the still air. She hadn't seen me, or maybe she had, and it didn't matter. Time here to move like it did elsewhere. The road shimmered in the distance, the light bending unnaturally, like heat rising from asphalt. I wanted to run to her, to scream and stop her before she made the same mistake, but my feet felt heavy, like the earth beneath me was clinging to my ankles. The faint smell of soil and decay rose from the graves behind me. I could still hear the whisper of my name, softer now, fading but not gone. Hollow Creek wasn't finished with me. Not yet. The air around me grew colder again. The sunlight dimmed, clouds rolling over the sky in slow, deliberate waves. I turned back toward the cemetery, expecting to see the rows of gravestones as I had left them. But something had changed. The graves were gone. All of them. The land had flattened into an open field of black soil. In the center stood one solitary grave, freshly dug, the earth piled neatly beside it. A shovel was thrust into the mound, and at the foot of the grave stood the caretaker. He looked different now. Younger, almost. His skin was less pale, his eyes more human, though the same weariness clung to him. He held his lantern, but no light came from it. Its glass was cracked, its flame long dead. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "Every story needs an ending," he said, "even the ones that refuse to die." I approached slowly, the crunch of my boots echoing in the silence. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. My voice trembled in the heavy air. "Another grave?" He nodded once. "The last one. For me. For all of you," he said. "Every Evelyn Marsh that's ever been buried here. Every lie you told yourself. Every version of you that died trying to forget." I looked down at the open grave. It was deep. Far deeper than any grave I'd seen before. The soil at the bottom was darker than the rest, almost black, glistening faintly like oil. It pulsed with a faint rhythm, like it was alive. "What happens if I go down there?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He turned his gaze on me for the first time, and in his eyes I saw centuries of sorrow. "Then you'll finally stop digging." My stomach twisted. The thought of stepping into that grave filled me with a dread so deep it felt like drowning. But another part of me, quiet and resigned, knew that I couldn't walk away this time. I'd spent too long running, from truth, from guilt, from myself. Hollow Creek wasn't a place anymore. It was me. It had always been me. The caretaker tilted his head, watching me. "You were never meant to stay," he said softly, "but you kept returning over and over, trying to rewrite the ending. You thought you could dig up forgiveness." "Who are you?" I asked. "Really?" He smiled faintly, and it wasn't kind. "The first one you buried," he said. "The one who stayed behind to keep the rest of you company." My breath caught in my throat. I looked closer, and suddenly I recognized him, not as David, not as a stranger, but as me. His face shifted in the flickering gray light until I was staring at my own reflection again, older, worn, hollow-eyed. My skin crawled. "You buried me," he continued, "when you decided forgetting was easier than forgiveness. When you told yourself you weren't to blame. You left me here in the dark to dig your graves and tend your lies." I took a step back, shaking my head. "No, I didn't know." He laughed quietly. "You knew. That's why you came back." The cloud shifted, and for a moment, a sliver of sunlight broke through. It touched the gravestone beside the open pit, revealing the inscription carved into it. "Evelyn Marsh. She found peace when she stopped lying." My knees weakened, and I fell to the ground. The soil was soft, damp, and cold beneath my hands. "What do I do?" I whispered. Tell the truth, he said again, just as David had before. But now his voice was deeper, echoing with the sound of countless others behind it. The voices of all the Evelyns who had lived and died here, trapped in this purgatory of guilt. Say out loud, to the world, to the ones still driving toward this place. She won't stop unless you do. I turned toward the road again. The car was still there, engine idling, the woman behind the wheel gripping the steering wheel tightly. My heart pounded. I didn't know how to reach her, how to bridge the gap between whatever world she existed in and this one, but I had to try. I stood and screamed with everything inside me, my voice tearing through the stillness. Stop. Don't do it. Don't bury him. Tell the truth. The sound echoed through the trees, reverberating like thunder. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the woman in the car looked up. Her eyes widened. She saw me. I knew she saw me. Her mouth opened as if to speak. But before she could, the air shimmered between us. The road twisted, the trees warped, and the entire world seemed to fold inward. The caretaker, my other self, watched silently as I fell to my knees again, exhausted. It's done, he said. You've broken the loop. The fog began to dissipate, revealing the cemetery in its truest form for the first time. The graves were few now, only one row, their stones clean and upright. Birds sang faintly in the distance. The air smelled of earth and rain, not decay. The oppressive heaviness that had haunted this place for decades was lifting, but the caretaker was fading too. His form flickered, turning translucent. You can leave now, he said. Where will you go? I asked. He smiled. Where all the forgotten go. And with that, he was gone, his lantern dropping softly into grass, the last echo of his presence vanishing with the whisper of the wind. I looked down at the open grave one last time. The soil inside was no longer black. It was rich, fertile, alive. I understood then. It wasn't meant for me to die in. It was meant to grow from. I took the cracked locket from my pocket and dropped it gently into the earth. Goodbye, I whispered. And thank you. The ground stirred faintly, covering it over with soil as if the earth itself had taken a deep, peaceful breath. When I walked out of Hollow Creek Cemetery, the sun was breaking fully through the clouds. The air felt warm against my skin for the first time in what felt like centuries. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. But as I reached the road, I noticed something gleaming faintly in the dirt. A small, round piece of brass. The locket. Whole again, its surface unbroken. Curiosity tugged at me, but I didn't pick it up. I knew better now. Some stories don't need to be told again. The breeze carried the faintest whisper as I turned toward the horizon. Remember. I smiled through my tears. I will. As I walked away, I could almost swear I heard the sound of a car door closing behind me. The woman in the car choosing a different path this time, the loop finally broken, and somewhere deep beneath Hollow Creek, the earth exhaled its final sigh. The cemetery was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was resting. And for the first time since that night on the rain-soaked road, so was I.